3 Sinister True Suburban Horror Tales Exposed. Discover the haunted secrets that terrify families. Rachel Morton had always felt safe in Maple Grove, but that tranquil facade shattered when an anonymous letter landed on her doorstep. The note detailed chilling past events connected to her cozy home. And that S when the shadows began to stretch. At twilight, they reached for her, clawing at her sense of security as the laughter of children faded into fear. Flickering lights would dance and then extinguish, leaving her heart racing in the oppressive silence of the night. It wasn't just the breeze anymore, whispers hovered on the air, too human to belong to the creaking trees around her. Days bled into nights haunted by a growing obsession. Conversations with neighbors felt loaded with unsaid truths, eyes flickering away from hers when she asked about the Moore family, the last residents before her. They had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a house echoing with silence. The woods that bordered their yard beckoned her children. Once a scene of playful discovery now felt like a trap. Lurking shadows whispered secrets of dark rituals performed beneath blood-red moons. Rachel couldn't shake her unease, even as Mark tried to reassure her. "It's just an old myth," he said, dismissing her fears. "You're overthinking it." But with every friendly barbecue and casual chat, she felt increasingly isolated in her paranoia. They were supposed to be a community, yet the pressure of their perfect lives began to suffocate her. That evening, the air weighed heavily. She made a decision. Gathering her courage, she entered the woods with trembling hands and a racing heart. She needed to face the terror head-on. But as she wound deeper into the woods, the path twisted unnaturally. Rustling leaves whispered her name, and every shadow felt alive, watching her. What she found sent chills down her spine. Symbols etched into trees, remnants of gatherings she couldn't begin to comprehend. A chill touched the back of her neck. She was not alone. Just then, a crunch of branches snapped behind her. She turned, her breath catching. A figure stood hidden in the foliage. Rachel sprinted home, her heart pounding against her chest like a war drum, every minute spent out there strengthening her resolve to protect her family. But when she shared her findings with the police, they laughed it off. But those whispers, they became louder, echoing in the corners of her mind. "Nothing to worry about, just wild animals," they said. That it gnawed at her. New questions emerged. Shadows in windows during family dinners. Neighbors smiling too wide, their eyes too bright with hidden secrets. Were they friends or predators? Something dark stirred beneath the surface of their friendly facade, lurking beneath the manicured lawns and BBQs. The truth was becoming unbearable. She felt her world contracting, leaving her gasping for air. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With that sense of encroaching doom, Rachel's heart raced. The whispers twirled in her mind. The idea that her home was a prison. That she, Mark, Sophie, and Ben were pieces in a dark game with terrible stakes. Each day passed like a breath held. Each neighbor's glance now felt like suspicion. As dusk painted the sky, an overwhelming realization settled deep in her gut. In Maple Grove, nobody could be trusted. Not a single familiar face that greeted her in the daylight could be protected against the dark thoughts she fought. It was clear now some terrible sacrifice was demanded to keep their veneer intact, and Rachel needed to find out what, or who, that sacrifice would be. As night closed in around her, the unease morphed into a question she could never answer alone. What did Maple Grove truly hide? The sun dipped behind the trees, smothering Maple Grove in an unsettling twilight glow. Rachel stood at her kitchen counter, stirring a pot of spaghetti, but her mind was lost in shadows and whispers. She felt the weight of eyes on her, the same eyes that had watched her enter the woods days earlier, now judging, calculating. Each clink of her utensils echoed unnervingly in the silence and bitter tension of the moment. "Sophie, Ben, time to eat." Her voice betrayed a tremor she couldn't quite swallow. Against all her instincts, she had let her children play outside again. The very thought made her stomach twist. Would they return unscathed? Could she keep them safe? She watched the living room window anxiously, the darkening sky a beacon of impending doom. A small voice broke her reverie. "Mom, can we have dinner outside?" Sophie's innocent request stirred a mixture of longing and dread. Rachel's heart raced. The backyard seemed innocent enough, but the woods loomed behind, an unfathomable darkness that gnawed at her sanity. "Let us eat in here tonight, sweetheart," Rachel said, forcing a smile, though her gut churned. "How about a movie after?" Sophie shrugged, distracted, her gaze drawn elsewhere. Rachel followed her daughter's line of sight. The neighbor's backyard was eerily silent. She squinted, anxiety prickling her skin. Each house seemed to pulse, watching, waiting. After dinner, Rachel tried to return to some sense of normalcy. Mark flipped through channels, but something was missing. The air grew thick, weighed down by secrets and guilt. The laughter they shared felt forced, an act rehearsed too many times. Then, a soft knock at the door shattered the facade. Who could that be? Mark muttered, glancing at Rachel. She felt ice in her veins. "I'll get it." Opening the door, her breath hitched. There stood Mrs. Daniels, a neighbor known for her unsettlingly perfect manners. "I thought I saw you in the woods." "Exciting place for a stroll, isn't it?" Rachel's eyes widened. Was there an accusation woven into her words? "Yes, just exploring." Mrs. Daniels leaned in, almost conspiratorially. "You should be careful. Some things are better left undiscovered." A dark, knowing smile curled her lips. Before Rachel could respond, the woman turned, smoothing her dress as she walked away, lost in the shadows. Once again, Rachel slammed the door and leaned against it, trying to process the weight of what she had felt. It was more than caution, it was a threat hidden behind a friendly smile. Her heart raced. What did Mrs. Daniels know? Frantically, Rachel turned to Mark, her voice trembling. "We need to leave. Something isn't right here." Mark frowned. "You're being paranoid. They're just neighbors who hide things. Who laugh while watching us." Her voice cracked. "You've seen it too. The way they look at us. It's like we're prey. What if they want our children?" Before Mark could reply, a loud crash erupted from the backyard. Rushing to the window, Rachel gasped at the sight. Their fence had fallen, but beyond it lay a new, horrifying discovery. A group of masked figures stood near the woods, chanting softly, hands raised to the sky as shadows danced around them. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. She grabbed Mark's arm. "I want to let them take our kids." But as she turned to face her family, only Ben stood there, eyes wide. Sophie was gone, lost somewhere in the dark embrace of the woods, the whispers beckoning her name. The realization struck like lightning. The eerie sense of safety had evaporated. What was hidden beneath the surface of Maple Grove now swelled with hunger, and soon, it might demand its due. Mark's voice shook as he demanded, "Where's Sophie?" But Rachel could only stand frozen, consumed by the dread of what lay ahead, knowing deep down that some sacrifices could not be avoided. As darkness enveloped the house, a new question loomed large in the air. What price would Rachel have to pay to save her family? Rachel's heart raced as panic spread through her. She could hear the distant chanting, a ghastly lullaby rising and falling with the wind. "We have to find her, Mark. Now." Without waiting for a response, she bolted for the back door, her breath hitching as she pulled it open. The cool night air wrapped around her like a shroud. She could barely see through the shadows, but the woods called to her, a malicious whisper in the back of her mind. "Wait!" Mark shouted, eyes wide with fear. But Rachel was already sprinting toward the edge of the woods, her desperation drowning out the silent warning of her husband. "Stay close to me, Ben," she yelled over her shoulder. She felt the cold gaze of the trees gripping her heart, leaves rustling like the secrets they were harboring. Each step pulled her deeper into a nightmare she couldn't comprehend. They reached the tree line and stopped, the chanting growing louder, reverberating through the ground and rattling in her bones. She squinted into the darkness, hoping to catch a glimpse of Sophie, a flash of blonde hair, a bright dress, anything to tether her back to reality. "Mom, I'm scared." Ben's voice trembled beside her. "I know, honey. Just stay quiet," she replied, getting down on her knees, peering into the darkness. "Sophie." Her voice cracked. "Sophie. Where are you?" The chant rose and fell, a rhythmic pulse resonating from deep within the woods. As it crescendoed, shadows twisted and danced, forming shapes just out of reach. Rachel's breath hitched at the sight, panic gripping her tightly. This couldn't be happening. She felt herself teetering on the edge of sanity, fear creeping in like a thief. Suddenly, a scream pierced the night. Rachel's stomach dropped. "Go back!" Mark shouted, grabbing her arm. "We can't do this. We need to get help." "No. Not without Sophie." She yanked her arm away, sobs bubbling up as she fought against the rising tide of despair. "Mom!" Ben cried, his voice carrying the weight of pure terror. Another scream echoed, this time haunting, filled with a chilling familiarity. Rachel's heart twisted in her chest. Was that Sophie? It sounded so close, yet so far away. Without another word, she pushed through the underbrush, her mind clouded with fear. She ignored the thorns that clawed at her skin and the sounds that hissed in the dark. All she could hear was the swaying chant and her daughter's terrified voice echoing in her mind. As they moved deeper, the trees closed in around them. The light from their house faded until it was nothing more than a distant memory. Rachel stumbled over roots, cursing under her breath. "Mom, I don't want to be here." Ben pleaded, pulling at her arm, his small body quaking. "Just a little further, please. I need to find her." Then, they emerged into a clearing, and the world fell silent. The chanting stopped abruptly, like someone had pressed mute on a terrible movie. In the center stood the masked figures, their bodies still, facing the deep shadows. Rachel's breath caught as she spotted Sophie. Her daughter knelt on the ground, trapped in an eerie circle etched into the dirt. A sickening sensation washed over Rachel, that this ritual was about her, about what she had unwittingly awakened. "Let her go!" Rachel screamed. But the words turned to ash in her throat. One of the figures turned slowly, revealing gleaming eyes that seemed alive with pure malice. "We are waiting," it whispered, voice dripping with darkness. "Mom! Help!" Sophie cried, her face laced with terror. The realization hit harder than any whip. They weren't just here to worship, they were here to claim. Claim Sophie, or worse. Ben clung tightly to Rachel's leg, now frozen in fear, as she stepped toward the circle. Panic surged through her, fighting against the urge to flee. How could she save Sophie from this malevolence that breathed and writhed in the shadows? In that moment, she knew they were all ensnared in a game far more sinister than she had ever imagined. As the figure smiled, a wide, hollow grin that seemed to pierce through her very soul, she sensed something that stole her breath. The price for Sophie's return might demand everything and more. "Mom, please!" Sophie's scream shattered their trance, reverberating in the twilight air. Rachel took a trembling step forward, heart racing, as darkness closed around them. What sacrifices would she make? What depths would she have to plunge into to bring her daughter back? And then there was the voice behind her, a whisper that made her spine freeze. "You shouldn't have come here, Rachel. The woods are not forgiving." The surrounding silence screamed in her ears. With the haunting chant resuming behind her and shadows stirring threateningly, Rachel stood between the very thing she loved most and the abyss, where she may lose herself forever. Sophie's voice echoed again, piercing the silence like a knife. "Mom, please, help me." The sound ripped through Rachel's heart, wrapping her in ice. She glanced back at Ben, whose wide eyes were pools of terror, reflecting the impossible situation they were in. "Stay here," she hissed, taking another step toward the figures. The cold earth pressed against her feet, grounding her, reminding her that this was no nightmare, this was real. Sophie needed her. "Run, Rachel. Get him out of here." Mark's desperate shout clawed at her ears, but a primal urge pushed her onward. "Not without her." Rachel's voice was raw, a fierce determination igniting within her. Around the clearing, the masked figures stood motionless, as if they were a part of the very night itself. They were cloaked in black, their faces obscured, but she could feel their gaze drilling into her. One stepped forward, raising a hand. "The price for your daughter is steep," it rasped, a voice that seemed to reverberate from the very ground. "To rescue her, you must offer something of equal value." Rachel's breath quickened, her mind racing. "What do you mean?" Phrases like offer and equal value were warnings ringing in her ears. "Only a soul will suffice," the figure continued, its voice a chilling whisper. "You or your husband. Choose." Time froze as fear wrapped its gnarled fingers around her throat. "No. No." Her heart pounded louder than the thrumming chant that resumed, echoing like a taunt. "They wouldn't take either one of them." Desperation clawed at her throat, choking her. "Mom!" Sophie called, her voice laced with terror as she strained against the invisible bonds holding her in that horrific circle. Staring at her daughter broke Rachel's resolve. "I'll do it," she shouted, edging closer, ready to condemn herself for her baby girl. "I'll give my soul. Just let her go." The masked figure tilted its head, eyes glinting like embers in the dark. "A sacrifice must be made willingly." "Are you certain?" Rachel's heart pounded in her chest, the weight of the decision suffocating her. Ben gripped her leg tighter, and she could feel his fear reinforcing her own. "Please, Mom. We can find another way," he cried, small hands trembling. For a moment, she was torn between the love for her children and the lure of dark promises. It was a choice no parent should ever have to make. But then came a rush of memories: Sophie's laughter, Ben's sleepy head resting against her shoulder, the warmth of their family. "Yes, I choose her," Rachel called out. "Take me instead." Laughter twisted through the air, chilling her blood. "So be it," the figure replied. "A soul for a soul, this will be your penance." The shadow around Sophie flickered, and the circle ignited with a blinding light that engulfed Rachel. Her heart raced as she fell to her knees, everything swirling into chaos. Ben's scream cut through her, sharp as glass. "No, Mom. Don't." As she was pulled into the light, the last thing Rachel remembered was Sophie's terrified face. The chanting grew louder, a cacophony of voices, echoing her name. Then there was darkness. Rachel opened her eyes to find herself standing in the clearing again, breathless and confused. The breath in her lungs felt foreign, heavy with despair. She blinked into the shadows, trying to catch her bearings. What happened? The figures were still there, but they were different now, each wearing a mask that screamed her own face back at her. "What did you do?" she whispered in realization. "Welcome back," the nearest figure smiled, her mouth stretching too wide. "Your sacrifice has awakened what lies within you." Panic rose again as shadows seemed to rise from the earth, swirling around her. "Mom!" Ben's voice rang from somewhere in the darkness, sending shards of fear racing through her yet again. But now, there were no choices left. Only the chilling rigidity of the night and the ongoing chant, "Rachel, Rachel, the woods are never forgiving." And as the figures began to close in, their smiles wide and all too familiar, Rachel understood that something infinitely worse was beginning. What price had she truly paid? What dark force now thrived within her? The forest drew her deeper, its whispers now entwined with her thoughts. She was no longer just a mother in search of her child, she was a part of something far more sinister. What had she unleashed, and would she ever reclaim her family? The chanting wrapped around her like a noose, tightening with each beat of her racing heart. Behind the figures, the darkness loomed, pulsating with a life of its own, as if the very trees were closing in, seeking to consume her. Rachel, they echoed, a haunting chorus that dripped with malice. You are one of us now. She stumbled back, the realization crashing over her like icy waves. Her breath came fast and shallow, and every nerve screamed for her to flee. But there was nowhere to run. The shadow figures invaded her vision, their twisted smiles locking her in place. Whereas Sophie? Rachel gasped, desperation clawing at her throat. What have you done? One of the figures stepped forward, tilting its head, the mask mimicking her features shifting unsettlingly. What you could not protect, it hissed. She is lost, perhaps forever. Shut up. Rachel shouted, her voice trembling. Her hands balled into fists, fury fighting her fear. I don't believe you. I can fix this. The figures laughed in unison, a sound like shattering glass. The mocking reverberated through the clearing, and their eyes glinted like ravenous animals eager for prey. You think you can fix it? They taunted. You are bound to the darkness now, Rachel. You are one of the forsaken. As they closed around her, she could feel the weight of their collective malevolence pressing against her. Her body trembled, and a part of her felt the chilling truth of their words. Inside, she could feel something stirring, awakening, a dormant power beginning to flicker. Not a victim but a conduit, the figure with her likeness grinned, the shadows behind it swirling menacingly. Your soul is ours, but your will still holds weight. Use it, or lose it. The urgency in its voice fueled her resolve, and Rachel took a deep breath, anchoring herself against the fear. I will find Sophie. You can't stop me. With renewed determination, she focused on the darkness. She could feel its pull, something deep inside wanting to connect. It was a whisper promising secrets and power, but at a cost. In that moment of choice, she sensed Ben still somewhere near, lost in the dark. I will save her, she whispered, summoning a force she didn't fully understand. I would give anything. The shadows shifted, swirling at her feet, drawing on her desperation. With a sudden burst, Rachel thrust her hand forward, closing her eyes as energy erupted from her core. The ground beneath her shook, a disturbance like the moment before a storm rolls in. Stop her. One of the figures shouted, panic creeping into their eerie chants, but Rachel pushed harder. Images of Sophie took form, her daughter's laughter echoing in her mind. I am your mother. She screamed, the power surging. I want to let you take her. The night split open with a blinding flash, an explosion of light that threw the masks back. She could see through the chaos behind the dark figures, something stirred within the trees. It was a shadowed version of Sophie, struggling against invisible bonds, a mirror of despair. Mom! Sophie's voice seeped through the turmoil. In a flash, Rachel stumbled back, feeling the weight of her soul tethered to the darkness. The pull strengthened, wrapping itself around her limbs, hissing promises of ultimate strength and revenge. Let her go. She commanded, voice echoing with newfound authority. The figures faltered, whispering between themselves, a cacophony of fear and confusion. But would her will hold strong? Would the dark force within her choose her path, or would it drag her deeper into its sinister embrace? Release her. Rachel shouted, grasping every ounce of courage. The masked figures wavered but tightened their grip. She is lost, Rachel, let go, and you shall stay whole. Rachel felt a demonic pulse sinking with her heart, each beat tempting her to surrender. Would the darkness claim her, or could she harness it to save her daughter? Determination surged through her. I will find a way. She roared, daring the void to test her, but just as she stepped closer to saving Sophie, a voice from the forest whispered, a voice that sent chills across her spine. "Welcome to the cycle, Rachel, it has only just begun." And as the darkness stirred around her, Rachel understood the true depth of the shadow she had embraced, what awaited her next in this cursed dance of fate. The shadows swirled around her, fierce and alive. Rachel felt the darkness tightening, but in that creep of fear, something deeper flickered inside her, a residue of hope. A desperate urgency flickered in her veins, pushing her to concentrate harder. The dark forces clawing at her were only as strong as she allowed them to be. "Let her go!" she screamed into the void, her voice cutting through the oppressive laughter that surrounded her. "You don't own me." Lightning surged through the air as she harnessed the twisting shadows, feeling heat radiate from her fingertips. The moment stretched, thin as a spider's thread, until it snapped. The ground quaked, and a rift opened in the thick darkness, allowing glimpses of a fierce light that spilled out, illuminating the figures before her. They recoiled, masks shifting in alarm. The air crackled with energy, the malevolent whispers becoming frenzied. "No! This power isn't for you!" they screeched, but Rachel stood firm. "Together, Sophie," she whispered, focusing on the ethereal silhouette of her daughter. "Hold on, I'm coming." The forest swallowed the sound, consuming it only to exhale a heavier silence. As if the trees themselves leaned in to listen, suspended in a dark tension. The shadow that mirrored Sophie writhed, and Rachel's heart twisted in response. She felt every ache of her daughter's isolation, the terrible weight of despair clinging to her small frame. "Mom, I'm scared." Sophie's voice trembled from the other side, reaching out like a ghostly hand. "I'm right here," Rachel cried, her determination igniting. With another surge of power, she reached into the dark, feeling for Sophie, fighting against the suffocating grip that tethered her daughter. The ground heaved beneath, trembling under the weight of the clash between light and dark. A howling wind surged through the clearing as Rachel withdrew into herself, gathering both fear and power, spiraling them together until they became a singular entity. Just a bit more." Rachel gasped, sweat dripping down her brow. The shadow figures recoiled again, their twisted forms losing some of their haunting allure. "Your light will blind us. You will be consumed." One of them hissed, a glassy edge to its voice. "No!" Rachel shouted. "I'm not afraid anymore." In that moment, she released a pulse of energy, a shockwave that quaked through the forest. The tangle of shadows bucked and writhed. Rachel felt a connection snap into place, a visceral thread tying her soul to Sophie's. A warmth filled her heart as she concentrated on her daughter's image, picturing the vibrant, spirited girl who had once filled their home with laughter. "Mom!" Sophie cried, a mix of terror and hope threading through her voice. The shadows finally released their grip long enough for Sophie to break free, stumbling toward Rachel. Their eyes locked, and with that electric jolt, Rachel felt the darkness recoil even further. But it wasn't gone yet. The sinister figures began to regroup, their anger boiling like lava. "We will not let you escape!" they yelled in a vicious harmony, rising up to encapsulate both Rachel and Sophie. "No!" Rachel surged forward. "We will break this cycle." With a final, defiant scream, she thrust her hands forward, that bright energy flowing outward. She could see their faces now, twisted with rage, but all she felt was love for her daughter. That love became a shield, flickering defiantly against the encroaching shadow. "Tell me what I need to do," Sophie cried, trembling beside her mother. "Trust me," Rachel shouted, feeling the darkness snap and warp around them, furious against the light. Just then, the whispers morphed into screams, shifting the atmosphere around them, growing desperate, vengeful. A blinding flare of light erupted from their joined cores, flooding the clearing and pushing back the darkness. The ground trembled violently beneath their feet, a searing surge emanating from their bond, but as they stand on the precipice of freedom, Rachel felt a chilling truth seep through the cracks of their triumph. "Together, we are unstoppable." "Rachel! yelled, defiant. Yet, in that fleeting moment of victory, a voice lurched from the shadows. You think you can break the cycle? You've merely begun to scratch the surface of your fate. The darkness churned, echoing its ominous promise, and with each heartbeat, Rachel sensed a deeper, more powerful force awakening within her, a force that frightened her more than the shadows that had trapped her. What terrible legacy had she now awakened? The air thickened, charged with tension as the shadows recoiled, hissing and weaving into grotesque shapes that twisted above Rachel and Sophie. The voice that emerged from the dark sent a shiver down Rachel's spine, perfectly calm but dripping with menace. It felt personal, as if this entity had emerged from the deepest recesses of her own mind. You've unleashed something far more dangerous. The words curled around her, dark and intoxicating. This cycle doesn't end with you. Rachel gritted her teeth, pushing against the encroaching shadows that writhed like venomous serpents. Panic pulsed through her, a frantic beat matching the thrumming in her chest. What did that voice mean? What lay dormant within her, waiting to be awakened? Stay close, Sophie. Rachel shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Her heart raced, the bond between mother and daughter glowing with a pulsing light, but doubt crept in, biting at her resolve. I can feel it, Mom. Sophie's voice was small, almost drowned out by the cacophony swirling around them. What is it? Rachel could barely formulate a response. The shadows writhed angrily, stinging the air with the acrid scent of decay. She braced herself, not just for the forces they were battling, but for what she might have to confront inside herself. Whatever it is, she said, her tone more firm than she felt, we face it together. With each step, the light from their connection flickered and dimmed, as if the dark forces resented their defiance. Rachel felt the shadows resetting around them, swirling like a potent thunderstorm. She focused, hungry for clarity, desperate to harness that power without letting it drown them. Together, she repeated, a mantra against despair, as an unseen force began to tug at her insides. Memories flashed through her mind, a childhood of running through sunlit streets, the warmth of baking cookies with Sophie, laughter dancing through their home. Love. It was the weapon she needed, but the shadows mocked her. Your love is futile. The cycle must continue. We will consume you both. Rachel's heart raced. She couldn't let them win, couldn't let Sophie become a victim of this dark legacy. The tree branches swayed violently, thrashing like demented hands. A roar of wind swept through the clearing, forcing Rachel to shield her eyes from the debris that sliced the air. Sophie! She yelled, panic seeping into her voice. Were they really going to be swallowed alive? In the chaos, whispers licked at her consciousness, seductive promises melding with dread. You don't have to fight alone, Rachel. Embrace it. You know you want to. Their voices intertwined with the storm, wrapping around her like deceptive silk. She tried to push them away, but the allure of that dark power seeped into her bones, whispering wickedly enticing truths. What if she wasn't enough? What if embracing that power meant saving her daughter? Mom, please. Don't listen to them. Sophie screamed, her voice breaking through Rachel's internal turmoil. The clarity of her daughter's plea jolted through her. Rachel felt the anchor of her love pull her back from the edge of despair. It was fear and power, but it was also joy and comfort. Love was real, and she wasn't going to let darkness twist it into something grotesque. The swirling shadows lunged at them, desperate and vicious. Rachel dug her feet into the earth. She could feel it, the power surging within her, demanding to be unleashed but still cloaked in fear. She took a deep breath, and in that moment of stillness, made a choice. No, I choose love. Rachel declared, spiraling her hands outward, funneling the radiance of her heart. The blast erupted from their clasped hands like an incandescent sun emerging from a moonless night, colliding with the darkness. The shadows screamed in agony as the light broke through. But then it hit her like a freight train, the realization that this wasn't merely a battle of light and dark. She wasn't just fighting for survival. The true fight lay deeper, within the roots of her own existence. Together, we'll break this cycle. Rachel. shouted, sensing the darkness beginning to push back, relentless in its attempt to envelop them once more, but somewhere, deep within the cacophony, a reverberation grew louder, a promise that was both horrifying and enticing. You cannot escape what lies inside you. As the shadows surged closer, Rachel felt the tug of fate pulling her towards something infinitely darker that had been awakened from the depths. What else had she unintentionally unearthed in this chaos? The light exploded around them, illuminating the whirlwind of shadows that recoiled, hissing in pain but not retreating. Rachel's heart raced as both light and dark clashed violently, sending a ripple of energy through the ground beneath her feet. She felt invincible yet on the verge of collapse, drawn deeper into the battle within. "Don't let go of my hand, Sophie," Rachel shouted, feeling her daughter's small fingers tighten around hers. They stood together in a chaotic swirl of light and shadow, wavering on the brink of hope and despair. The shadows thrashed wildly, thick tendrils curling like smoke, lunging for anything within reach. The air crackled with power, with danger and electrifying mix that screamed for them to flee. Suddenly, a chilling, familiar voice echoed within the storm. "You're not just fighting for your lives, dear Rachel. You're fighting for the darkness you inherited." Rachel's breath caught in her throat. Memories surged forward, her childhood, her parents, the whispered warnings about family curses, about the darkness that plagued their lineage. The very thing she had tried to shield Sophie from was returning to haunt them both. "I won't let you take her." Rachel felt that protective rage coil inside her, a blaze igniting the love she clung to. But the shadows snickered, and their voices blended into one mockingly divine echo. "You think this love can save you? You think you're strong enough to resist?" Rachel glanced at Sophie, her daughter's face pale yet determined. It was a stark reminder of everything she was fighting for. She couldn't back down now. If love can be twisted, it can also be the light that breaks your chains. With renewed fervor, Rachel focused on Sophie, channeling every piece of warmth and strength she possessed. More light burst forth, radiating like tendrils reaching out to embrace the shadows. For a brief moment, she believed they could push back the darkness forever, yet the shadows grew desperate, blaring a cacophony of shouts that seemed to come from everywhere. "You cannot hide from what you are, Rachel. You are of us." The tendrils lashed out wildly, dark fingers brushing Rachel's skin, cold and clammy, igniting fear. A horrible realization washed over her. The darkness whispered truths about herself she had long denied or forgotten. Traits of selfishness, anger and fear dredged from the depths of her soul like forgotten horrors clawing back for attention. "No. This isn't me," she cried. "I'll never allow you to take me." But the shadows lunged even closer, threatening to swallow them whole. Rachel could feel their malevolence seep into her thoughts, and for a moment, doubt threatened to unravel her resolve. Would embracing her darkness grant her the power to save Sophie? What if it wasn't the darkness inside her that they wanted, but her acceptance of it? "Mom, don't." Sophie's voice broke through the darkness that pressed heavily against Rachel's mind. "We have to stay together. Please." Trembling, Rachel's gaze flickered to the forging shadows, to the whispers that grew louder, tempting her to give in. But as she felt Sophie's grip tighten on her hand, clarity struck. The shadows surged, a tidal wave of despair threatening to crash over them. Rachel dug her heels in harder, feeling the earth under her as she focused on the glimmer of connection with Sophie, the love bond that transcended fear. "Together, Mom," Sophie shouted, her spirit shining through. "Together." Rachel echoed, summoning all the love she could, pushing back against the encroaching terror. But just as they seemed to pierce through the veil of darkness, a piercing wail exploded around them. It was a scream that echoed of loss, of despair, and something worse, something forgotten. What if breaking this cycle meant uncovering more than she bargained for? The shadows began to twist, convulsing in agony, and she realized this could be just the beginning of a truth far darker than either of them anticipated. What would it cost them to confront the horrors woven into their past? The shadows convulsed violently, writhing like worms exposed to the light. Rachel felt the fury in the air, palpable like an electric storm. She squeezed Sophie's hand tighter, desperate to anchor them both in the decaying reality around them. The ground quaked beneath their feet as if the earth itself was reacting to the crescendo of chaos above. "Keep holding on. We can make it." Rachel's voice was strained, her heart pounding against her chest as she fought to maintain focus. A sudden silence fell. It was unnerving, a vacuum that swallowed even the sounds of the shadows. A suffocating stillness wrapped around them, and then, as if activated by the tension, a murmur began to rise all around, hushed whispers layered like an ominous fog. "You seek to defy your legacy, but the truth will bind you." Rachel felt icy fingers trailing up her throat. The shadows had transformed, coalescing into a shape that hummed with familiarity. An embodiment of her fears, a reflection made flesh. "Mom?" Sophie's voice trembled, pulling Rachel's focus back. "What's happening?" "Nothing, sweetheart. Just hold tight." The words were a lie. Panic clawed at Rachel's throat. She couldn't let the shadows twist the truths planted in her heart, nor could she allow them to consume Sophie. As if her thoughts sparked a reaction, the shape morphed, taking on the hazy form of a woman, her mother. Rachel felt her breath hitch. "No. Not you." "Rachel," the shadow murmured, its voice hauntingly tender yet laced with venom. "I've missed you. You've always struggled, running from what you are, what we are." "No!" Rachel shouted, her voice echoing defiantly. "You're not real. You're nothing but a trick." But it wasn't just a trick. It was the past returning, a darkness that claimed roots in her very soul. Each whispered truth scraped against her like broken glass. Yes, she had fled from that legacy, the stories of torment and despair. But here it was alive and tangible, metamorphosing into a twisted trove of her worst memories. A sharp pain flared in her chest. What if it was true? What if she was always meant to be more than just a woman trapped in the mundane? The thought sent chills cascading down her spine. The shadow seemed to drink in her fear, growing more substantial, more menacing. "Embrace it, Rachel. Your darkness will save you, will save both of you." "No!" Sophie screamed, the grip of her hand faltering. Rachel's fear morphed into fury. "I won't allow you to take her." She thrust her heart out in defiance as the light erupted fiercely from within her, a brilliant explosion that split the shadows apart. But the echoes of that darkness only stirred deeper. "You can't escape us," echoed in her mind, loud and relentless. She felt the shadows clawing back, eager to re-establish their hold. With every ounce of will she possessed, Rachel fought. Focused on Sophie's frightened face illuminated anew, she pushed back. The shadows recoiled, but they weren't defeated. Then she heard it, a faint melody, soft yet stirring. A lullaby from her childhood, woven like a thread of warmth cutting through the encroaching coldness. Could love be the secret weapon they needed? "Mom, you have to remember. You've always had the light." But would that light be enough? The shadows snarled again, ramping up their onslaught, and Rachel heard a dark truth whisper behind her. What if embracing her light meant some shadows would remain? With a final surge, the shadows lunged forward, intent on tearing their bond apart. Rachel gasped as the tendrils twisted around Sophie, pulling her back. "Mom! Help! No!" Rachel screamed, reaching out. But the shadows were winning, their laughter a chilling reminder that the darkness was not just outside but deep within, feeding off every doubt, every fear. Suddenly, darkness and light collided violently, the two forces embracing in one final, agonizing dance that would determine their fate. Would Rachel's love be enough to banish the shadows, or was surrendering to them inescapably tied to her own survival? The battle for their lives was far from over. The shadows churned, swarming around Rachel and Sophie like ravenous wolves. Rachel stood, heart racing, as despair clawed at her throat. She knew in that moment they were more than just trapped in this clearing, they were locked in a battle rooted in her very essence. The darkness wanted to claim her not just as a vessel of fear, but as a carrier of its dark legacy. "No!" she roared, her voice breaking through the cacophony of whispers, pushing against the gloom that threatened to swallow them whole. "You don't own me." In an instant, she felt the pulse of warmth, brighter than any light, coursing through her veins, the love she had for her daughter. "Together!" she shouted, squeezing Sophie's hand tighter. The bond they shared was a beacon that broke through the thick veil of shadow, igniting a fire deep within her. "Stay with me, Sophie. We'll break this together." Rachel couldn't just push the darkness away, she had to confront it. Memories of her own mother, of the stories about ancestors who failed in this very place, flooded her mind. Each ancestor who had succumbed to their demons had woven threads of despair into their legacy, threading through generations. But Rachel realized, with a fervor fueled by determination, that she could rewrite that narrative. The shadows tensed, recoiling from the light emanating from their bond. "You think love can undo the darkness? You are ours, Rachel." They bellowed, their voices united in a twisted harmony that echoed through the trees. "No!" Rachel screamed, eyes blazing. "I am not a victim anymore." With a deep breath, she summoned the strength of every loving memory, every moment of joy, and poured it into her voice. "Our love is stronger," she shouted into the swirling darkness. The ground trembled beneath her as the shadows momentarily faltered, and for a second, she felt invincible. The dark figures hesitated, their masks shifting uneasily. "Push. Push against it, Sophie," Rachel urged, feeling the raw power of their connection surge. A warm glow manifested between them, erupting in a brilliant explosion of color that washed over the clearing. The shadow figures screeched, recoiling from the intensity of the light. "Mom!" Sophie called, her voice rising above the frenzy. "I can feel it. We're almost there." As the radiant energy began to expand, the darkness shrieked in outrage, the shadows writhing and twisting around them, trying to envelop the light. But Rachel stood firm, feeling the warmth of hope wrapping around her and her daughter. "Together!" They shouted as one, their voices harmonizing against the darkness. With a final, determined blast of their energy, the light surged forward, piercing the heart of the shadows. In that moment, Rachel felt a palpable connection between her and the very fabric of the universe, a realization so profound that it burned away whatever darkness lingered within. The pulse of the earth thrummed through her, intertwining with her essence, and she felt an overwhelming surge of strength. The shadows began to dissipate, clawing at the air as they felt the undeniable truth: love was not just a feeling, it was a force. With one last burst of energy, Rachel unleashed a wave that engulfed the clearing, consuming the darkness. "This ends now," she declared, eyes aflame with determination and purpose. The figures melted into the light with anguished screams, their forms dissolving like smoke under the sun. The clearing blossomed with light, restoring the peace that had been absent for so long. A hush fell across the woods, a stillness that echoed with freedom and relief. Rachel turned to her daughter, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Sophie!" she cried, rushing to pull her daughter into a crushing embrace. Wrapping around them was warmth that felt as tangible as the sunlight filtering through the trees, washing away the remnants of fear. "Mom, we did it," Sophie whispered, her voice shaky but filled with hope. "You saved us." Rachel held her tight, the weight of a world lifted from her shoulders. "We saved each other." As they stepped back into the light, the shadows retreated. Into nothingness, no longer a threat, no longer a part of their lives. With the burden of fear shattering into pieces, they emerged from the woods, the air refreshing and pure. Together, they walked home, hand in hand, united against whatever the future may hold. "Mom, do you think we'll ever have to go back?" Sophie asked, looking up at her with curiosity. Rachel smiled, her heart swelling with a warmth that chased away the cold of their dark past. "No, sweetheart, it's time to live our lives fully together and free." As they crossed their yard, she felt a sense of closure, of finally stepping into the future, unburdened and untethered to the darkness that once threatened to claim them. Rachel looked toward the horizon, where the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. It was a reminder of hope, a sign that every ending brings with it the promise of new beginnings. With resolve, Rachel whispered softly, "Maple Grove, you might have held shadows, but now it belongs to us." And with that, they stepped into their home, where laughter replaced fear, and the shadows would never haunt them again. This is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss any of our exclusive stories. And if you can, smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending, because we want to hear from you. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion.